So yeah, this is like our first in-person Bearded and Broke podcast. All the previous ones we've just been doing over Zoom.
This is really, really weird for us. Even though this is like our 20th odd episode or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, we're coming up to 20th, and we're probably going to get a bunch of neighbours walking by in the background whilst we're on like a granny seat. But it is what it is.
Yeah, better than doing on Zoom.
Better than the rest performance yesterday, am I right?
Oh, mate. You got a 10 out of 10 for being an Arsenal player, though.
I hope he got his bribe all right.
Do you know what? I start to think if the FA are involved in it somehow, give Arsenal a bit of European football, because Chelsea were just taking that European spot away from them, wouldn't they?
Mm.
So, of course, with what the Arsenal goalkeeper did at one point, where Chelsea had a ball through and their goalkeeper just run out and basically caught the ball outside of the box. There wasn't a VAR decision or anything like that. The game just kind of flowed afterwards. That's on top of when Xhaka stepped on top of Kovacic, when Kovacic got his second yellow, and then went off and got a red.
Exactly. It was
So many decisions. You were even saying, watching it with me, the amount of decisions that went against them, shoulder to shoulder, when Chelsea pushed them off, that's a free kick. But when Arsenal do it, it just continues.
Arsenal did it worse.
They went
and
into the
nothing
back,
happened.
didn't they?
He took him round the back. He took both his legs out. Didn't touch the ball at all.
Yeah.
And the refs just said play on. And they didn't even bother to review the goalkeeper being outside the box.
No.
They didn't even review it. Like, what's the point of VAR if you're not going to at least go back and check?
Mm.
Like, it defeats the whole point. And as a neutral fan, initially I was like, oh, Dan's being ridiculous in the first half when you were complaining about the ref. But into the second half, I was like, what's the point?
Mm.
This isn't even... They're not even making an attempt to be balanced.
When a team wins, and when we were in a cup final and the other team beat us, I will put my hands up and say, you know what, we were the worst team.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We didn't deserve it. But in that game, I think it should have been a draw. Looking at if the decisions went our way, they had a goal from an offside position, Arsenal. But then again, the amount of times, especially towards the end of the game, that Chelsea were pushing up, but their momentum was broken up by stupid free kicks given away, like shoulder bunches that Arsenal got away with. It was just like stuff like that broke the team play. Really pissed me off, and I just want to move on from it, because I think nothing will really look over it now, will it? It's done and dusted. The FA won't do anything about it.
No.
And VAR, like for any Bournemouth fan, they know exactly how I feel. With VAR, is complete dog shit. When Aston Villa had that goal and the goalkeeper was in the net with the ball, not given.
I think that's probably the most egregious one that I can think of. Like, my issue with VAR is the implementation, because the only way that they can call on VAR is if the ref, the one in the middle of the pitch that controls the game, if he asks for it. Whereas if you look at rugby, obviously if he asks for it, they can use it, but also there'll be a fourth official upstairs who can call on the ref and say this needs to be reviewed. Sideline refs in rugby can also say this needs to be reviewed, and the ref will go, okay, I'll review it. In football, that doesn't happen. It's all on one guy, and they don't ever have to explain their thoughts or justify themselves. They just go away, and it's kind of left at that for us to discuss. It doesn't make sense. It's not implemented well at all.
I don't know who carried out this VAR project to come out, but FA have got some involvement in it, and it almost seems like they have come out and they went, oh well, yeah, we'll have video referees, great stuff, but we're not going to think into depth with it. We'll just roll it out, which it doesn't really happen with a big project like that. And of course, there's going to be teething issues, which is understandable with how long it takes to make a decision. That's almost like I would let that go. But with some of the decisions that we're making, considering this has been brought in to bring the right decisions in, it hasn't done that.
No, it's not done well at all. Like this just reminds me of. Do you remember a couple of years ago where Spurs were fighting for fourth place?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure they were. And the ref, was it something Clatterley or something like that?
Mark Clattenburg.
He came out after the game and said, oh, well, okay, I didn't get a few things correctly, but it made for a good end to the season. I'm like, no. Your job is to make sure it was a good game.
Yeah.
And he said there were some things that he missed, deliberately or otherwise. And you're like, dude, that is your job to make sure these things are called correctly. Otherwise, what is the point?
Yeah, it's incredible because it's almost like when you do a mistake at work, you will know from your boss that you
Yeah.
fucked up. Whereas these guys, like, oh yeah, I made a mistake. That's it. It's done. That's okay, is it? You've cost the football club potentially millions of pounds, and be it the football clubs aren't necessarily your employer, but you're there to make sure that the rules are adhered to. And if that doesn't happen, then surely that football club is bound to file a complaint or file a lawsuit with the Football Federation to say, well, you're not actually adhering to the rules properly that you've set out.
It does. It does. Like I know we're. I'm kind of into conspiracies with like the Ghislaine Maxwell thing and everything. This kind of feels like a mini football conspiracy for me, because it just doesn't make sense. And the only reason I can see it happening is because they wanted Arsenal to be in some sort of European football instead of Tottenham.
I do feel like, I mean, as a Chelsea fan, I feel like we've been absolutely robbed from.
You have been.
My experiences with. I don't know if you remember the Barcelona game 2009 when we had, we should have had about 4 or 5 penalties in that game. We completely robbed. So it's like, well, why didn't UEFA want us to get into the final? Because it would have been the same final as in 2008. Chelsea were back there to get revenge, and you look at it and you think, well, what could they have gotten out of it? They just didn't want an all-English final again, did they? They wanted another team going in. And I feel like with what you said with conspiracy, this is a massive conspiracy theory because there's no way for us to prove it. And as we know, the likes of FBI know everything that's been going on, but they don't want to deal with it. So anyway, maybe not the FBI in this case, but maybe the MI6. Not that they care about football and Premier League and FA Cup, but they're the only ones who could get that all that information, which they don't care enough about. So we can't prove it, and it's something that touches me and it pisses me off completely. But what can you do about it?
Exactly. That's the most annoying thing, is that there's nothing that can be done. We just got to live with it and move on. But we were just speaking about this morning. Eddie Howe's now left Bournemouth as well,
Which is so sad. In 2009, when he took over, just looking at the stats before we started airing, looking at the stats, he took over, I think, as a caretaker manager in 2009, January the 1st or something like that. Bournemouth were 23rd in League Two. So, considering in 10 years he's brought them up 4 leagues, and despite this year, they were a stable Premier League club.
They were doing very well for a long time.
And some of the transfers, like I've mentioned to you again before we started airing, if you look at it, Dortmund bought Haaland for 18 million, and Bournemouth bought Solanke for 25, and you think, like, there's a £7 million difference there, and of course you get a premium with English players, and I respect Bournemouth for trying to bring English players through, but there's a reason to why both Chelsea and Liverpool let him go. I mean, those clubs clearly see something that the smaller clubs didn't, and Bournemouth have been doing that with all of Liverpool stars. They bought Jordan Ibe for a silly amount of money, and they've had a few like that, and I think this is the result for them for these transfers. Their scouting system might not have paid the best of money for these stars.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really sad because I feel like Bournemouth were a team that were, they're a small club where you look at their stadium, they're like 16,000 capacity. And it's the same with Brighton. They're not really a top club tier. They're not a Blackburn. They're not a Newcastle, where those old historical clubs have been up at the top of the Premier League to come back into the Premier League. So it was very different for the last 5 years having Bournemouth in the Premier League, and I really hope they come back next year. I don't know if it will, because these things go one way or another. But
well, what you see with Premier League teams that go down, and we saw this. I was a West Ham fan, so we saw this in 2012, where the first season after you come down is the best opportunity for teams to go back up, because there's such a difference in income for teams between the Premier League and the Championship. So they have those 3 years where the Premier League will pay them slightly less money each year until they're back down at Championship level revenues, so that they don't go bust instantly, because there's such a big income disparity between the 2 leagues. So that first year is where you obviously have your largest payment from the Premier League, and that's where you've got a significant advantage over those other teams that have also just been relegated, or other teams that are just starting to come up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I can't remember which teams have missed out on promotion this year, but
Well, the Welsh teams, Cardiff and Swansea.
Yeah, so they'll
out.
be at a disadvantage compared to Bournemouth and Watford and Norwich, because they'll get a larger payment from the Premier League. They'll be able to obviously spend more money on players to be able to bring them in, and then that gives them a better chance of being able to stay up. So that there's a good chance of them being able to go up. It really depends on their manager, who they have. If they have Big Sam Allardyce, they're set, because that's what he does.
What's he doing now?
Sitting on a beach, living his best life, I presume.
That's not bad. And you've got David Moyes doing the hard work.
Absolutely, but he kept us up, to be fair to him.
It was after lockdown that he saved you, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Before lockdown, you looked to be.
I was saying this the other week. Like I was fully prepared for us to be going down, which would have been. Objectively, it would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
Because West Ham, we moved into this new Olympic Stadium a couple of years ago, and we're expecting to move on to bigger and better things. And that was after when we had Payet and things, and everything was going well. It would have been quite funny, objectively, to see us go from that to relegation. But we are where we are now. I have no clue what to expect. Probably going to spend out more money on another striker in the summer who's going to do nothing for us again, and we'll just repeat the cycle year after year.
I think that you were quite lucky to escape relegation, to be honest, because I wouldn't have been surprised if you went down, you wouldn't have been back up, and that would have been it. You might have been fighting playoffs, but then, as you said, the money coming in would be less and less and less, and then it will be a championship set, and then that will be it after that. Where West Ham have been digressing for what it feels like as a non-West Ham fan. They've just been going downhill for the last few years, and they're getting closer and closer to relegation.
Absolutely, but the thing is, we were actually quite stable under Moyes before he was sacked. He had a little bit of a wobble just before he was sacked, and then they decided to bring in Pellegrini, who they thought would be like the next step up, and it just didn't work out to be that way. I don't think he's that kind of manager. He's the kind of manager who he's more suited to Spanish and Italian style leagues where not every single game is very competitive, and the Premier League is competitive. It's more physical. He did all right at Man City, but he was brought in there as kind of a nice guy to just kind of keep the ship steady, not really rock the boat too much, because they just had Roberto Mancini and Balotelli had their massive bust up. So I thought, okay, we can't keep having the squad be divided and fighting all the time. So let's bring him in and calm everyone down, get everyone on the same page, and then we'll get Pep in after 2 or 3 years, and then we try and really kick on and have a lot of success. Looking back on it, he probably wasn't right. And I said this before, it's so funny that we sacked Moyes to sign Pellegrini, to sack Pellegrini to re-sign Moyes. It's like, what?
It's already weird though, like putting yourself in the manager's shoes. Like how do you go back to a club that didn't want you, and now they're like, oh no, please come back to us?
Well, that's what happens when you need money, right?
Yeah.
Like when this is.
But then again, Moyes became like a multi-millionaire when he was sacked from Man United, because he had a contract for like 6 years running when he was sitting on a beach in Florida.
How much was he getting paid for that?
I don't know, but he had a contract for 6 years, which of course Man United sacked him
after one,
if that, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. So yeah, it's a good project, and I do think we could do well next year, or if everything goes well, but we just don't know. I mean, with the season starting later and everything being so up in the air because of COVID, we can't predict it. So we just got to kind of live with it, really, and figure it out.
Yeah. So you start talking about Man City, and I think this is a good way for us to
to get into the actual topic.
Yeah, you're right. Where I've watched the Man City. What was it called?
It's All or Nothing.
All or Nothing documentary on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And then I don't know when you've seen the Sunderland Till I Die Netflix documentary.
Seen bits and pieces. I haven't watched too much of it.
if any viewers or listeners haven't heard it or listened to it, viewed it, I should say, go watch the Sunderland one, because the
It's a shit show.
the shithousery that goes on in there is absolutely hilarious. You, you you see how not to run a club, basically. They used to have an owner that basically lived out in America somewhere, or still lives out in America, but back when he owned Sunderland, he used to just be so disconnected with the club that the club would just do something, not really consult the financial department, and just send the check over to the owner. The owner would just sign it off, and then that's where the shit started, because no one was really looking at what they were spending. It was just like, oh, we need this, okay, and then that's it. You go sign it, we buy it.
Right.
So, the mess they got themselves into, really sad, really.
What did they get themselves into? Because I'm struggling to remember.
So they had a cryotherapy room, which
Okay.
cost them, I think, £80,000 a month.
Right.
This is just one example of what was going on. No player had used it. They didn't know how to use it, so it was just there, and they were paying £80,000 a month.
Right.
And the new owners, eventually, when you look through this documentary, there's a few spoilers. I have to say that there's a new owner that's come in, and of course, when the documentary was showing, he was really cutting back on costs and all that. Now he's wanting to sell them, because he's realised how awful the culture within the club is. It can't really change it as quickly as he thought. So he came in and he said, well, why have we got this cryotherapy room? Who's using it? What players are using it? And it became quite apparent that only one player was using it, and that was a player that was only really using it once every few months when he felt like it. So to run it for one player who used it when he felt like it, without a proper sports science department running it, it's just a shit house. And you watch it, and they went through one chief executive looking after, which he couldn't really manage anyone, and then the new owner came in, so he brought his people in, and it helped steady the boat a little bit. But then with their culture, they went straight away when they went, oh well, we're running things our way, you're going to listen. And that's where they started losing a bit of the employees, like the marketing manager. You could see that they've had a bit of friction there, and just how they want things run. It wasn't a very nice environment to be in. You wouldn't want to work for those managers personally, on how they were treating their staff. So you watch that, and you think, oh, okay, well they're only a Premier League club a year ago, 2 years ago. So on the field they must do the job. And of course, when they got relegated from the Premier League, they thought, right, come on, we need to get back in it. They got relegated again into League One from the Championship. So just a massive shit show. And of course, then you just see the misery of the fans, and all you got to do is laugh. Like it's sad, but not being a Sunderland fan, all you got to do is laugh. And I'm sure Newcastle fans love that documentary so much, because I know there's chants on when they were played against each other saying, "Oh, we saw you cry on Netflix" and all that stuff, which is really funny. But you watch it, and it's the misery of the fans, and they still have hope. They go to Wembley when they get into the playoff final, and they lose that game. It's like, well, they get nothing their way, which is horrendous, really. But if you like football and you like a bit of drama, definitely watch that documentary if you haven't.
Mate, it's so funny. But you have to really feel for the fans. And then you contrast that with the Man City All or Nothing documentary, which is so well run. Like, the club appears, to be fair, it doesn't show too much of the behind the scenes stuff. It mostly shows Pep coaching and like the games that they.
You can tell he loves it though, doesn't he? Where he's standing there and he sees the camera and he's like, oh yeah, I could do this and do that, and you go run over here, and it's like, Pep, you like that off camera?
True, yeah. You do want. He can't be like that all the time. No. You feel like it's put on a little bit, but you see that it's really well run behind the scenes, the club, and the fact that they were on it. They already had players that they want. To be fair, finances is a big part of it. They've got so much money that they can just chuck at it, and they know that they'll be okay. Whereas these teams like Sunderland, they're kind of living month to month pretty much. And you've also got to consider the fact that, now with COVID, it's kind of exposed a lot of those flaws in football, where we're seeing something like 70% of clubs are now really struggling financially because they can't play games and they can't earn much money.
From gate revenue, you mean?
Yeah,
People-
from ticket sales and from some shirt sales and things. Like all their revenues just gone down,
Yeah.
massively down, and Man City are one of those clubs that will forever be fine with the current owners that they have. So they know that they can splash out on players and coaches and facilities, whereas teams like Sunderland can't do that because they're okay. To be fair, they did spend 80 grand a month on cryotherapy chambers or whatever, but they didn't have people to run them.
No, and that's the awful thing, because you don't have the hierarchy where you know who's the leader and you know who's to look to and you know who is talking about what they should be talking about, and not flipping a room that stands in the corner and you think, oh, it's nothing to do with me, so I'm not going to deal with it. I feel like that was quite a lot of Sunderland, where they were almost fed up of, I don't know if it's that losing culture that they had going on, but it did clearly hit a spot with them where they didn't care, and I don't know what it is. I only seen what was shown in the documentary, and of course that's chosen to be shown what the Netflix producers want to be shown. So of course there's a lot of drama in that. But with Man City, I think they're a case that's exceptional. I think with how much money they plough in, no football club's doing that right now. They, if you've been living under a rock or in a bubble, they have been miraculously unbanned after spending too much money, and only been made to pay 10 million when they're not guilty somehow. They still owe 10 million
Exactly.
to UEFA. So anyway, without going too much into that before I set off, it's one of those things where they plough money into the women's teams and they say, oh well, it's sponsors and all that, and of course where their sponsor owns their them and the sponsor, I think it's Etihad, isn't it?
Etihad Airways,
Which
is owned by the same royal family that owns Man City.
You can play around with money, and then again, when you've got enough money, you can play around with it even more by paying UEFA 10 million when they find out that you've done something wrong.
Exactly.
So all in all, I think they're an exceptional case in that scenario where Pep Guardiola spent $500 million on defenders now. They're buying Ake, was it 507 million the last however many years Pep spent, and they still lose 10, 11 games a season. So when you think Chelsea's defence is bad, there's also Man City.
True. One thing that I found quite funny genuinely funny from yesterday was seeing your face every time the ball went anywhere near your defence.
Yeah.
Instantly shit yourself. But
all the fans saying, "Oh yeah, Kepa shit." Yeah, his stats are shit. But then again, when you have wooden sticks standing in front of you defending the ball, yeah,
exactly,
you can't do much.
Exactly, it's ridiculous. Obviously, the one job the keeper has is to actually move to try and save the ball. And there was a stat, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's something like 30% of the goals that Kepa conceded were because he just didn't move.
Yeah.
And he conceded against like 55% of the shots that were taken against him.
Yeah.
So
every other shot basically you take against them, you will score.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's worth your while just whacking it and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But Man City, they just have so much money, and they established a clear authority and winning mindset, which teams like Sunderland just don't have. They seem to be all over the place. No one seems to want to be there, really, which is sad.
In Sunderland?
Yeah, in Sunderland. No one wants to be in Sunderland.
I mean, it's not a part of the world you want to be in. Full stop, is it?
But you would want to go there if they were winning, but no one would want to be involved with the club.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where they've established themselves as one of the better teams in League One now. So I think they've steadied the ship a little bit from what was going on before. And where, like we said, it's the culture. If you got a losing mentality where you've got a club that has a room which no one really knows what the use of it for is, and they kind of just disregard it, and you think some kind of senior management would walk by it and be like, well, what is that room, what are we using it for, and just question a few people.
Yeah.
It would escalate, but it wasn't like that. So that culture there is just horrific, and I dread to think what it is like, in in actually being there and working there, because you look at in that documentary, the people who work there, they don't look enthusiastic whatsoever.
No.
They look like they want to slit their wrists going into that building.
Absolutely, and knowing how the wages are in League One, like their life wouldn't be particularly great. And I've been in those situations where you've had shitty managers, who are just dicks to you, and you don't want to do anything for them. You don't want to be proactive and helpful at all. You think, okay, I'm just going to get in. I'm going to do the thing. I'm not going to do it particularly well because I'm not particularly enthusiastic, because my manager's an arse, and I'm just going to get in, do this thing up until 5 o'clock, and then I'm going to go home. And I'm just going to procrastinate. I'm not going to be proactive. I'm not going to work to find solutions to things, to problems, which is a big part of what people do, no matter what role they're in. Like this, we had to spend time setting this up. I wouldn't do it if I didn't care.
No, that's true.
So
it's the little things that you take for granted almost that you do.
And they stack up.
Yeah.
After a while.
And it really shows. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Again, I'm sure if they got paid a little bit better, that would be something to put past them.
But
yeah, it's not a thing. I don't remember whose theory it was, but they're saying that money doesn't actually equate to happiness. It's the progress that you can have in work, the development that you've got, and all that sort of stuff. But when you work for a club like Sunderland, and I'm not saying they're a shit club, I'm just saying they haven't had the best of luck with owners, they haven't had the best of luck with their leadership. So maybe the employees are just there to earn their living, just bring some money home and survive, because that's what, unfortunately, that part of the world really is, just survival.
Well, that's what it's like for most people. It's just about getting by, and then after a certain point, it's about once you've got bills paid and things, finding something that you actually care about, doing, and you would hope that working for a football club is kind of that next step once you've got everything paid for. So what I'm trying to say is that you would kind of hope that there would be a bit more effort put in by the people at the top to make sure it's a good work culture before, to make sure that the people are actually willing to be productive. Because if you don't like someone, you're not going to do well for them. You're not going to work hard for them.
No, but as a footballer, if you look at it, their careers are basically based on their performances, aren't they?
Yeah,
if you play well, then you'll go and be signed by a better club. So I think that should be enough as an incentive to go and play.
I was talking about like employees, like backroom people.
Right, okay.
But as players, absolutely, you should be wanting to play well week in, week out. Unless, well, no, you should be wanting to play well week in, week out. Otherwise, why are you there?
Yeah. Especially when your career is so short, you want to earn as much money as you can in that 10, 15 years that most footballers really have up in their.
That's
I was
doing
gonna say
well.
Peak, but
I was going to say 5 years is probably, I suspect, the average career of a footballer is a lot shorter than we actually think it is.
Yeah.
Because in the Premier League is obviously those guys can do well for quite a long time, and if you're not Premier League standard anymore, you can go and play in the Championship. Whereas Sunderland are now in League One. If they're not doing well in League One, okay, they'll go to League Two. What happens once they get a bit older and they're still struggling in League Two? That could be towards the age of 30, and you could go off a cliff, and you're like, oh great, I haven't earned much money from this, so where do I go?
Well, I think what we're talking about, earning a lot of money, is really Championship and Premier League levels. League One, I don't think they really, I think a player at the top club in League One, a star player, would be on, had to push maybe 10 grand a week. That's a proper star player.
I think that's pushing it.
And I'm not going to be saying things that I shouldn't be saying, but I've worked for a League Two club for a little bit as one of the marketing people throughout my uni placements, and I was quite lucky to have a conversation with one of their players, which I'm not going to name, of course, but he let me know how much his salary was. And being a player for a League Two team that Crawley Town aren't comfortable in League Two. They're always 15th, 12th, at the best. So they're struggling in League Two, you could say. And his salary is 36 grand a year. 36 grand a year is probably enough for someone whose career is going to be 40 years long,
Yeah.
50 years long. But for someone whose career is probably going to be 10 years max, that's quite worrying. What's he going to do when he can't run around for 90 minutes anymore?
Exactly. Like, he's going to have to, and I suspect he'll probably end up falling into coaching, because that seems to be what a lot of former professionals do.
Or punditry, if you're high enough footballer.
Yeah.
I mean, Robbie Savage is the pundit, so everyone's got hope.
Exactly right. If Robbie Savage can do it, then there's hope for us.
Yeah. What's he won?
Oh, he won
Milk
like
Cup or something like that.
yeah, he won like some youth cup thing when he was a youth.
Came
player.
on as sub in the 90th minute and he won it.
And he got his winner's medal. Nice one, Robbie. You played a really important role there, keeping the bench warm for the sub.
You wasted 30 seconds of that game.
Hey, that's a big thing. That's a big thing in some games.
It is. You're right.
But where are we going? Oh yeah, we were talking about certain players' wages. Yeah, so like if he doesn't want to go into coaching, what does he do after that?
Well, you've had a lot of, I say a lot, you've had the likes of Juan Mata and I know Azpilicueta's doing it, where they're doing like leadership degrees at universities. And again, is that the sort of stepping stone, maybe not coaching as such, but where Petacek's gone into straight into like management and, you know, scouting and being that kind of, what's his role? Was it technical advisor or something like that, where it doesn't matter, but essentially he's part of the scouting team, which helps bring in people in. So, going to that senior management type of role, but it's who you know, isn't it? It doesn't matter.
Always.
If you look at the players who've gotten there, Ryan Giggs, his first managerial role was Man United. And would he have done that had he not been a Man United player for like 15 years at the top level? No. And you look at his role now with Wales, it's the same thing. Yeah, Lampard wouldn't have gotten his Derby role if he didn't know, of course, Harry Redknapp's his cousin or uncle, whatever is family related. He was in really good relations with a Derby owner. So it's who you know, and football is very much of an industry of, oh yeah, I had this player play for me, I'm going to call his agent up and see if, you know, what his situation is and whatnot. It's very rarely you go out and do things in a very formal way, like going out and buying a player from Spain that you've never been across, but you like the way they play, so you're going to buy them. When you look at it, you know, it might be a more dated thing, but Harry Redknapp buying the same load of players all the time. You've had Peter Crouch, Defoe, Cranchar, Chorluka, all those players. Why? Because he knew them. And it is rarer nowadays, don't get me wrong, but it's still a thing. And when you've got Lampard who's just come in, and all of his backroom staff, which worked with him and at Chelsea under-18s when he was the assistant to Jody Morris, they've come in and, it's about who you know. And
Well, that's the same for any industry, to be fair.
I think it really shows, from my experience, it really shows in football.
Oh yeah, it massively shows up in football, but you also see it in things like finance, for example, where certain people, like I could have, if I wanted to, I could have gone into some kind of finance role because my dad works in finance, so it would have been quite easy to get that kind of job. But I didn't really want to because it's not what I wanted to do. But you see the point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you would have been able to get places because of where your dad does, where your dad works and things. So it's the same. It's the same for a lot of people, and you know, I don't begrudge them necessarily for taking advantage of that, because why wouldn't you? I think you'd be quite silly to not take advantage of those types of things that are just given to you. So it's just the way it works, really.
Yeah, maybe I'm being a bit salty about it.
Because you didn't get to where you wanted to get.
Yeah, I was overlooked a few times, but not getting into that.
Yeah. I mean, we all get over. It just is what it is, really. It's part of it.
Yeah. So didn't really talk about Sunderland or Man City as much as we would like to.
We barely spoke about
but
it.
hopefully that kind of intrigued people to go and watch those documentaries.
Yeah.
Can't wait for the Tottenham one, because having seen some clips from Mourinho's team talks, this is going to be amazing. We can't wait to do a pod on it. So thanks for listening and watching, guys.
Yeah.
This has been hopefully a little bit better with no lagging or anything like that.
Yeah.
And tune in for the next episode.
Yeah, see you again next time. Cheers.